This brings us perfectly to the topic of light triad personalities, and we are so fortunate to have one of the leading experts in this field, Barry Kaufman. Scott is acclaimed for his work on intelligence, creativity, and human potential. So we're thrilled to have you join us, Scott. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a delight to be here. Let the timer begin. Okay. Yes, my work is grounded in an understanding of self-actualization and what it means to become a whole person. Really briefly, many of you are probably familiar with the Maslow hierarchy of needs. It turns out that we put a big X over this. Maslow never drew a pyramid, and that is a big misconception. Long story short, I redefined the hierarchy of needs to be a sailboat, which is, I think, more in line with Maslow's thinking that we have to have our security needs and our growth needs. But in the next 4 minutes of my lecture, I'm going to zoom in on love. Do you see a little cursor going over here on love? Okay. Maslow has this great quote: clinical study of healthier people who have been love needs satisfied shows that although they need less to receive love, they are more able to give love. In this sense, they are more loving people. He differentiated between deficiency needs, D needs, and B needs, or being needs. And I love this concept of be love. So we can distinguish needing love from unneeding love. Love coming from a place of deficiency versus love coming from a place of love for the being of others. Instead of needing love, be love is admiring. Instead of striving for satiation, be love usually grows rather than disappears. There was a whole area of research called the dark triad. Well, there still is, but it's been going on for quite some time in the field of personality psychology. Lots of research, thousands of studies on the dark triad, or what they called the socially aversive personalities, when Delroy and colleagues first published this in 2002. The dark triad personality comprises narcissism, psychopathy, Machiavellianism. They've now added a fourth one, the dark tetrad now, which is sadism. If you got all four of those things, that's some dark shit right there. So that's some real dark shit. So I asked my colleagues. I went to the office of the Positive Psychology Center at Penn. I went to the office of my good friend David Yaden, exacerbated because on Netflix all the documentaries are about dark triad people, crime documentaries. And I was exasperated. I said to my friend David Yaden, I said, "Is there anything interesting about people who aren't assholes? Like, is there anything interesting at all?" And David's like, "Good question," and I'm like, "How come no one's ever like studied the the white, other personality traits?" He actually sent me an email when I got back to my office 5 minutes later that just said light triad question mark. And that one email would set off a whole new area of inquiry in personality psychology. I responded, is there a light triad? He said, "No, I was just joking." And I said, "Well," and then I called an emergency meeting in my office and I said, "Let's just create a new program of research." So what is the light triad? Well, I think it's encapsulated well by this quote by Anne Frank, who, as the Nazis were coming up to find her to kill her, she said, "I still believe in spite of everything that people are truly good at heart." My gosh, if you could still maintain a faith in humanity after what she went through, I think we all can maintain that to a certain degree. The light triad comprises three members: Kantianism, which is treating people as ends unto themselves, not mere means; humanism, valuing the dignity and worth of each individual; and faith in humanity, believing the fundamental goodness of humans. So like one of the items of the Kantianism scale would be, I don't feel comfortable overtly manipulating people to do something I want. Humanism would be, I tend to admire others. Faith in humanity would be, I tend to see the best in people, just to give you a flavor of what the light triad is. I hear someone asking, "But Scott, aren't we all a mix of light and dark traits?" Yes, of course. That's why our research, we've been done follow-up research looking at statistical models, looking at how much light and darkness is within each of you. By the way, you can take my free test at self-actualizationtest.com, and it'll tell you whether or not you're a Yoda or a Darth Vader. So go take that test, and then, yeah, if you're a Darth Vader, don't talk to me. I don't want to be your friend. Okay, so the dark triad subtype is more prevalent among U.S. senators. We did a whole coding subjectively well, we try to be objective. We did coding of speeches of U.S. senators, and we found that on all these traits, dark and light traits, and we found the dark subtype is very prevalent among U.S. senators. Very prevalent. The darkness is strong among U.S. senators. We found senators with dark traits are more likely to stay in office, even though they're less likely to get co-sponsorship for their bills. So they're more charismatic and able to get voters, but they're less likely to be cooperative team players. We found, though, that in terms of well-being, the white triad is correlated very strongly, the white triad subtype. So this shows like we're all a mix of light and dark, but there are some people who are more pure light and there are some people who are more pure dark. And this actually teases apart how pure and you are. Isn't this interesting? We can actually statistically model how pure goodness you are or how much you're like a mixed asshole. We found like the mixed asshole, group. Well, that's the middle group there. That's not what we technically call them, but that's what I'm calling them right now because I'm a cheeky fellow. Okay, so light triad and life satisfaction is correlated with each other. Now, I just want to get to, we just submitted a paper to Nature that we've been working on for years. So you're the first ones in the world to hear about it. It's called, Is the Democratic Status of Governments Associated with Citizens' Malevolent versus Benevolent Personality and Well-Being? We're so excited about this paper because we have been collecting data from 75 countries. Isn't that crazy? We have data from 75 countries to over 200,000 people to kind of answer this question. And here's the results. We found that as governments varied from autocratic to full democracy, there was corresponding decreases in malevolent traits and increases in benevolent traits. By the way, we now call them malevolent versus benevolent as opposed to light and dark, because some people are like, oh, it sounds racist saying dark traits. Now, I don't completely agree with that it's racist saying dark traits, but we're trying to be, PC here. So malevolent versus benevolent traits. We find that as governments varied, you do see that correlation. And this chart is fascinating. We found that as the quantitative democracy index, this is a very well-known sort of aggregation to actually measure the democracy index of an entire nation. We found that as the democracy index increases, it predicted increased benevolent and decreased malevolent traits, while only the benevolent traits were related to well-being. There was a not statistically, there was a tendency for malevolent traits to be negatively correlated, but that wasn't statistically significant. So these findings highlight the links between governments and the personality among its citizens and how democratic practices might influence well-being. Lots of implications here, which I can't wait to discuss with the other participants. One clear way in which citizens' personality may lead to less democratic governments is through their voting preferences and view of political figures. People with dark traits themselves tend to prefer dark political figures. Is anyone surprised by that? Huge shocker, right? Voters with dark traits, we actually have found research showing that jerks also are attracted to jerks in terms of romantic relationships as well. So it's, the attract like attracts like, they find each other on Tinder. Okay. Voters with dark traits may be numerous enough to tip close elections in favor of politicians who also manifest dark traits. A bi-directional effect may create a downward spiral towards authoritarianism. And we do believe, I'm just going to end on a positive note here, there is potential for a virtuous cycle of increased democratic practices, more benevolence and well-being, and a decreased likelihood of authoritarian processes with further increases in democratic practices coming from people who harbor more light triad traits. So thank you very much for your talk, and I hope I didn't go too much over. And sorry for those who don't like my cussing, part of who I am. Thank you so much.